The previous basket is under review.
There are definitely times doing what I do for a living that I pinch myself and I'm like, man, like, how unreal is it that I get to go to like elite college basketball games and write about it and talk about it? And being there for the Keaton Wagler show on Saturday at Mackey Arena was certainly high on that list. Had to beat the snow out of there. The weather was getting bad as I got out of town, but I'm certainly glad I made the trip for one of the games of the college basketball season. One of the performances, best performances I can remember by any freshman, by any player, really. It was all-time stuff. It was awesome. For those unacquainted, 46 points. The way he did it too, tough step back jumpers and like big time play after big time play on the road in one of the best environments in college basketball. Just absolutely ridiculous. And we wanted to break it down, Foss. We realized pretty quickly, like, this is a game we need to devote some serious time to. And I think it's interesting because the narrative about this game and what it means for both teams, I mean, the Wagler performance almost overshadows, I think, some like really interesting kind of learnings about both teams from how they played, the stylistic battle, the X&O, tactical decisions that both coaches made and how it played out in the game. To me, it was like the perfect game to do a scout team video about. So I'm excited we're hopping on and doing it.
It was. We've been featuring mostly teams or concepts throughout this year, even going back to the offseason, of course. So this is our first time really doing one of these. Let's like relive this game, and it's one that I just can't. We haven't got enough of. We want to get back into it, and I do feel like while there's been plenty of discussion about this game and a lot of like, oh my, like Wagler's nice, and like people talking about the freshman class and how deep, like I still feel like the stuff we're going to discuss today I haven't really seen out there, and I'm excited to kind of focus on a few things that we saw that were really interesting. And while one of the predominant things I was seeing in recapping of the game was, what does this say about Illinois? And some people are like, oh, well, what does this say for Purdue? Because when you're a preseason number one team, every game's a referendum, no matter what happens. I really do feel like this was both an Illinois game and a Purdue game. I thought that there was a lot to take away from both, and that's what makes it a perfect game to talk about today.
Yeah. So let's start with the central decision that shaped the game and set the stage for Keaton Wagler's performance, which was Purdue deciding to switch almost everything and allow Wagler to play in isolation against Trey Kaufman-Renn and Oscar Clough, and occasionally Daniel Jacobson, although only once or twice did that happen. And to me, this was a direct result of seeing what happened to them on the road at UCLA earlier in the week when Tyler Bilodeau killed them, especially late in the game, with pick and pop threes. And I think it was very obvious that Purdue was worried that with Illinois shooting bigs, Mirkovic, both Ivisiches, Jake Davis, who's like kind of a wing, like Humrick House, like they have so many options stretching the floor. I think they felt if they hedged and got into rotations defensively, that it was going to be a long night with those really good shooters. And they were going to instead stay home on the shooters, make Keaton Wagler beat them. And, well, I tweeted at halftime, like, I think you stick with it, because at the end of the day, if Keaton Wagler beats you by scoring 40 on the road, he beats you by scoring 40 on the road. He needed 46, but he did it. And that was pretty remarkable to watch. So let's show some clips of exactly what happened.
Yeah, right from the jump here. So let's look at these possessions. And I think the kind of important thing to do if we're talking about, do you stick with it or not, is let's not as much look at the results, but look at the quality of the shot they're getting. Let's like look at the quality of the possession offensively, defensively. You can see that there's certainly times where Illinois was getting what they wanted, but still, like, ultimately there was still a lot of contested deep jump shots, which we ultimately saw that Wagler can make. But I think if you're going into the game and you're seeing the quality of these looks, you're actually thinking like, okay, if you're Purdue, you're like, okay, I think we can kind of manage where we're okay with this skip out contested three in the corner. So I know a lot of people were just like, how do you switch? It's terrible. You're getting killed. If you just actually go back and watch all these possessions like we're doing here in the first minute, like this quality of shot, like, yes, he is making some of them, but I think you do have to be relatively happy if you're Purdue. And why do you switch? It's to keep everything in front. It's so that you don't give up. You don't get into you don't get to scramble situations. You don't get into rotation where it's a kick out and it's an open three, or it's attacking closeout and a drop off to a dunk. So I think in the early minutes of this game, I actually liked how Purdue defended. I think in a lot of these plays, I think you look at them. If we were to pause the shot in the air and say, like, well, was this a good defensive possession? Most of them you'd say yes. Yes, there's a couple of times where, especially in that first play where Wagler's able to lay the ball in. But on a lot of these plays, like, they're keeping everything in front, they're stunting, recovering, they're contesting shooters. And I can certainly understand why Purdue looked at this and said, okay, like, he's not going to keep making these tough ones. Most times that will work. And I think you're just like, you're looking at a lot of the quality shots and like how difficult they are, and you're probably thinking you're good living with them. So at this point of the game, kind of the 10-ish minutes in, I was definitely on the side of like, hey, I think Purdue's doing all right here. And to be honest, as someone who doesn't think that Oscar Clough can move his feet that well, like, I thought he performed admirably, and I thought guys were playing really good off of him and really helping out, shrinking the floor. And again, a lot of these kind of kick out threes to teammates, they were well contested. Now,
I was just gonna say, like, I think objectively, Oscar Clough did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds ridiculous. Again, I know how it sounds. I thought, like, for the most part, like, these guys were not just getting fried in crossovers and Keaton was living in the paint. Like, they were able to move their feet enough. And part of this is that Keaton Wagler is not the most shifty. Like, he's able to get to his spots. He's very creative, but he's not like a burner downhill, right? So he's not getting by you. And I think that was definitely part of the calculus, was like, we think our guys can move their feet enough to force these tougher shots. Like, we're not just giving up paint touch over paint touch because of the switching. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that I think too, if you're thinking about like Clough in space against anyone, or insert any 5-man against any talented scoring guard, what if you're thinking, okay, like, what is the shot you're most willing to give up? It's probably the 29-footer off the dribble with the hand in his face. Like, and that's what I look at some of those makes. And if you're Purdue, you probably think that eventually it's going to come in your favor, but maybe not. Let's fast forward here to the final 4 minutes of the game when Purdue has a lead and they go away from the switching. And this is going to be interesting because you can see they're going to go to the hedge, put 2 on the ball for a brief moment, which opens up the opportunity for the pick and pop 3. So I find that interesting on 2 dimensions, because first of all, they went against what they did most of the game, and 2, they didn't guard it very well. So here's a situation as well as we watch this one. Wagler is not a threat. He is walking sideways, and they still commit 2 on the ball and let him do whatever they want. And that's my problem with this coverage, is not that it was a bad idea to go hedge, but Wagler isn't doing anything. He's just standing in the same spot, and Purdue is still like just letting him do whatever he wants. And that's where the execution and kind of playmaking was, or like the decision to do it in the execution, I thought was poor. You need to get that guy moving backwards. You need to be hedging against someone who's looking to get downhill. And Wagler's bouncing the ball in one spot, waiting for Purdue to walk defenders up to him. And those were the easiest pick and pop threes that Illinois shot all season. So it's one of those things that some of the switching early, I thought there was like good execution, and then the results were bad. And then at the end, when they changed their strategy, I don't think it was necessarily a bad decision, but they executed it so poorly. And you could also say, well, maybe it was because they didn't hedge all game. They were out of that mode. But it can sometimes be like when you look at the final minutes of the game, you outsize what won or lost the game. But I look at 3 threes on just horribly broken coverages by Purdue. Obviously, Illinois has to like make the shot, but like that's really what the game kind of came down to me, was a couple of minutes on key plays where Purdue changed everything they were doing and executed it very poorly.
Yeah, like what I was thinking as we watched that was like, that's not a Houston hedge. And I'm not expecting everybody to like be as aggressive as Houston, but like, I think if you're going to force the ball out of Keaton's hands, you want it to not just be like, hey, you have to pass it to the guy right next to you. Like, it shouldn't be an easy pass. And I just didn't think it wasn't nearly aggressive enough a coverage for me if you were going to be aggressive and force it out of his hands. The other thing I would say is, with the way the game had gone and the way that Keaton was obviously very tired, and you saw that, like, he left the floater short with like 5.5 to go, and Illinois took a timeout afterwards, and then you had the U4. But like, Keaton was obviously like running on fumes. That was a ton of minutes, in a high pressure environment, a ton on the ball. I mean, there were trips where it felt like he was like they didn't use him at all, and he was just like on the floor as a decoy, but they had to keep him out there. But he was resting on possessions. Like that was the level that they were, wearing him out. And I thought it was letting Keaton off a little easy to not make him make these shots. Like again, like if there's ever a point in the game where I think he's going to stop making this 28-foot step backs, it's when he's played 35 minutes already. Like that to me would be when the switching would be most effective, because that would be when like, all right, like our guy, like he's worn down. He's not going to be as creative getting to the cup. He may not be as like he may be more willing to settle and take the tough shot because he doesn't have the juice left in the tank. And so that was my issue with it. Like if you were going to stick in it, and I actually didn't mind sticking in it for the first 35 minutes of the game. I think there's a lot of times where there's pressure to change something because it's like again, results oriented versus process. And I thought the process was okay with the switching. I think we could probably argue certain things. Like I think because you don't have big wings that are like super athletic, like I wish like Harris and Cox were just like up into Keaton more and more aggressive. Maybe they were a little too lackadaisical with some of the switching, gave them the matchup a little easier. But like I didn't hate the switching. I disliked getting out of the switching more than I disliked being in it, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about like the tiredness of a Wagler, and then even talking about how you were like, this doesn't look like a Houston hedge. Whenever you watch Houston or an Iowa State, the number one thing you see is that you're like, oh wow, those ball handlers are getting sped up. That's the thing that it always talks about. They are playing. The offense has to play faster than they want, and to watch Wagler, who also in post game interviews you can tell is a pretty chill guy. I mean, you saw that in the last possession where he stood there and bounced the ball in one spot. A hedge came to him. He wasn't threatened by it at all. And then he hooked the pass over the top. But, you talked a little bit too about execution within some of the switches. And I think we've got some video here that would point to that as well, because as much as I love that switching in the first kind of 10 minutes of the game, it did start to break down. And this to me is both the execution of Illinois and something that they picked up on, but also some really poor coverage from Purdue. Whether you are guarding a ball screen and in a conventional way, a drop, a hedge, or if you're just switching it, the number one thing you need to do is make sure the ball handler goes towards your teammate. You need to force the ball into the screen if you're in a conventional coverage, or you need to force the ball to your teammate if you're going to switch. As you watch all of these possessions that started at the end of the half, they were not forcing the ball handler into the switch, and they kept getting rejected and rejected and rejected by Wagler. And that's why he started to create that downhill rim pressure, or it meant that suddenly the switch defender was on the wrong side. And then you got some of those blurred, are we switching or not? And then you got to some of these pick and pops. So kind of notable that Illinois started to pick up on this and started to look for the reject every single time. Wagler started to look for the reject every single time. And that's also where you started to see, here's another rejection here that ends up with a layup or a foul there. But yeah, that's just like the number one thing about really any coverage. And as much as like Purdue has been okay in coverage, you don't get split like that if you are into the ball and you are forcing the guy into the screen. You don't get rejected if you are into the ball once you see it, or once you hear ball screen coverage, once you switch. You need to get into the ball and you need to dictate where that ball handler is going. And this one, again, perfect example here. You don't dictate where the ball handler is going. He goes the opposite way and there's no one there to help. And it often looks like the big is way out of position, but really it's the guard's fault. If he doesn't push that ball handler towards the action, it's that ball handler defender's fault. And again, Braden Smith, obviously incredible. Even I think underrated as a defender, but a lot of these plays, I mean, he's got to get into the ball handler. He's got to impact. And because they didn't, rejection, whether or not they were hedging or switching, it started to break down. And so I would say like, that's kind of a concern I have looking at Purdue's pick and roll coverage. And I also thought for Illinois, it was something that was really good that they picked up on and just kept pulling at that thread. And it ultimately resulted in those final possessions where they knew just what to do.
Yeah, 100%. Look, and I would say this, I think for Purdue, particularly Cox and Harris, because those are like the role player guards that are supposed to be your best defenders. Like there just had to be like a level of pride. Like this guy's not getting by me. And I know this is not like the most like X&O tactical take of all time, but that's why you're here. Like Ja'Cory Harris was recruited to Purdue, not to like drain shots. Like Ja'Cory Harris is there to not allow what Keaton Wagler did to them. And I just felt like I just felt like there was never a possession where it's like, okay, we're gonna rough them up, we're gonna like get really physical. Like there was one possession that, and I actually Keaton a ton of credit for this because he's just so smart. It was probably 5 minutes into the second half, and Cox like really got up into Keaton and was like trying to really up under him, and Keaton just like sort of smartly like ripped through and like got contact like an NBA like an NBA player would, and drew the foul. And it was foul on the floor. It didn't even score points, but it was just like I don't think it scored points. Like it was just like, oh, like it just totally neutralized any like thought from from Cox. Like, yeah, like I can't do this. Like we can't get up into him. We have to let him do his thing and hope he starts missing jumpers. And I wouldn't have gotten away from that if I was Cox and Harris. Like if I was Painter, I would have been all over those guys. Like make his life hard. Like turn him over. Do like he never once looked sped up or out of control. He was completely in command of the game and made every right decision. And that's a huge credit to him. But it's also, I think, a criticism of a Purdue defense that just lets guys be really comfortable. Like they are not a disruptive basketball team. And I think it's hard. It's not impossible, but I think it's hard to win at the level Purdue wants to if you don't find ways to disrupt the opponent. And there were very few flustered possessions from Illinois, and certainly not any from Keaton yesterday.
Yeah, I think that this goes back to, we talk about so often with so many defenses that we think are really good that are just disruptive. And I think you can also be still kind of conservative in your concepts while still just not being easy to play. Like you could play a drop pick and roll coverage, but when you've got a ball handler that just gets into the hip pocket of the ball handler and gets him over the screen and pushes him over and speeds him up there and can get back in front. But I just think the last thing you can do is just not dictate anything what the offense is doing. Again, I still think you can be on the conservative side of coverages, but still have some impact on what your opponent can do. And just throughout the entire, we probably showed 20 possessions already offensively between those couple of videos, if not more. And just, I think each of them, it was Illinois doing whatever they wanted. And Purdue just kind of reacting, steps slow. Even though and you could say I guess some of those switching ones where I thought they guarded pretty well. Thought guys did, pretty good in the gaps a little bit too once it was into isolation. But yeah, any of these actions, not a big fan of how Purdue was able to guard them. And that's one where I know I joked before that when you're a team that comes in as a championship contender, every game becomes a referendum. And I certainly don't want that to be how we come across, but this is something that we have talked about for Purdue, even, kind of going back to last year, going into our preseason video about Purdue. And this isn't the only game. It's been a bit of an issue.
And so we're clear, Illinois is the best offense in the history of Ken Pom right now. It is a high bar we're comparing it to, but these to go win a championship, Purdue is going to have to get through teams like this. And they're also going to have to get through teams that offensive rebound the way Illinois did, which was a huge part of this game. I mean, Illinois missed 29 shots. They got 13 of them back. That's massive in a game like this. And again, when you think about Purdue's personnel, right? You don't have these big athletic wings. You are going to be reliant on maybe more tougher shots, post scoring and pull-ups from Braden. You have to be dominant on the glass. And they got their butts beat by this entire Illinois team doing something pretty unique. And you've pointed out on previous videos about in Europe, but doing something pretty unique that I think sets the table for why Illinois is so elite on the offensive glass.
Yeah, I mean, I love seeing these concepts coming from Europe and overseas that have come to the college game and had success. And I talked in the previous video about how it would maybe be a good idea to guard Michigan, which is somewhat notable for a team in their conference, using a concept called tagging up, which is often more of a transition defense system more than it is an offensive rebounding system, but it can also help get extra possessions. And it was actually started by Aaron Fern, who's the head coach at Charlotte, in kind of a previous life when he was overseas, and then got really popularized by a lot of prominent coaches in Europe. But the concept, if you didn't see our last video, is when a shot goes up, everyone is going to run to the top side of their man wherever he is, And by doing that, you can kind of be aggressive on the glass while still being on the right side of your man to get back in transition defense. But also, if you can just absolutely scrum your guy under the rim and get position, you're going to get a lot of those 50-50 balls. So watch on every single one of these plays, 4 Illinois players sprint into the paint, get to the top side or the back of their man, and they're right kind of in the mix. And a lot of these 50-50 rebounds that are popped up, there's a couple of touches. They seem to all go to Illinois. And maybe there's a little bit of, luck that happens once things are getting kind of popped around, but they put themselves in position to be lucky by all being near the paint, all being right next to their man. Because if you're always getting a piece of your man and the shot goes up, yes, they might be on the slight right side of you, but you're always going to be in the mix for the same rebounds that they are. And they just got rebound after rebound on this high side tagging up system. And I just thought it was fascinating to see that also they could still kind of be aggressive in that way. And Purdue wasn't able to kind of hurt them in transition defense at all. That's kind of another story of the game. Purdue wasn't able to get out in transition because of this, but you can see how aggressive it looks on every shot where everyone is just like sprinting to the back of their man. And this was a whole lot of offensive rebounds that I thought were a direct result of the tagging up system. And I think as we look to what does this mean for Illinois, like I did mention, I thought this would be a great way to play against Michigan. Michigan, of course, looking a little bit more mortal than when we did the video, but I think that this is something that I think it just has given Illinois huge advantages, both on offensive rebounding and with transition defense. And again, it's like we talk about with the teams that like use a 2-for-1 when no one else is in their league. This is something that I think is just another way to get more than incremental advantage. I think there's just huge gains that Illinois is getting. And again, just one other part of the story was using the system, being aggressive on the glass, staying in transition defensive position. Yeah, Purdue, who's can get out and run, and particularly with Braden Smith, be really good in transition. They didn't have those opportunities. So I don't know how many people were talking about the tagging up other than us on our show. So but I thought it played a massive role in this game, and also what I think Illinois could do this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where I wanted to go next, as we sort of put a bow on this video. Like, but I think Illinois is awesome. I've thought that really since very early in the year. It's just one of those teams, and again, this doesn't necessarily predict, they're definitely going to win the championship, whatever. But like when they've lost, it has felt like, oh my, like there's like a level of shock, and you feel like you really have to like dive into how it happened. Because they just have such a potent formula, right? They have multiple guards that can go really get a shot. They have, at this point, they have an elite lottery pick level guard in Wagler. Boswell and Stojakovic are big and physical and tough. They have shooters who are great in their roles. They have rim protection. They can like pull you away from the rim with the bigs that can shoot. But those guys are also physical and tough enough to go offensive rebound. Like they sort of marry like all the best parts of like a old school Brad Underwood offensive rebound toughness team with like modern day shoot a ton of threes, highly skilled. Like it's a perfect recipe, and I'm a huge believer. Obviously, a win like this is very validating for them. But they have another monster road win at Iowa. That was a really great performance. They won at Ohio State already. They won at Northwestern, who I know has struggled, but like is still like a real team. So they've stacked road wins, and that's how you win a conference championship. Those are the types of teams that tend to win. Win in the NCAA tournament. Like they have a very potent formula. I do worry a little bit about their defense still. And speaking of non-disruptive teams, I mean they're 365th out of 365 in defensive turnover rate. They don't turn you over, but they don't foul, and that I think certainly helps. I don't know. I mean, I love this group. I think they're really, really good, and the fact that their identity now is very clearly like this is Keaton's ball club, and he can go get every shot that they need. And it's sorry, this is now I'm rambling, but I remember when I went to practice in October, and Keaton was obviously a standout. He was obviously very good. He looked like an NBA prospect. Whatever. Certainly didn't see this coming, but you could tell he was like a serious player. And one of the things that their staff told me was that it's been hard for Keaton, like personality wise, to like be the team's alpha. Like that's not who he is. And he has like sort of a natural sort of deference to, the Boswells and the Stojakovic's, who were supposed to be the best player on the team, who are the older guys. the leaders. And, I think obviously he got a ton of on-ball reps in practice early in the season, etc. But I think there was still this level of like, I'm just trying to do my part. I'm trying to play my role. And I think if the 46-point game does anything, it makes it very obvious to him, like, go be the dude. Like, you're the dude. Like, and I think the whole team has fully rallied around that. And I think the Boswell injury almost clarifies that as well, right? Like, when Kylan comes back, there will be no debate. Like, all right, like who has the ball in critical late game possession? It's going to be Keaton. And I think, so again, brutal as it is to lose Kylan Boswell for a month, I think the growth for Illinois from November to now is that it is clearly Keaton Wagler's ball club, and Keaton Wagler looks a lot more comfortable with that truth than he did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think the defensive point, like if you are looking for where the question still could be for Illinois, I mean, Purdue still at 1.29 points per possession in this game, which probably could have won it. And again, I really did think that this was Purdue's game up until the final minutes, where I thought that they botched coverages as much as they possibly could. And when you're playing the current number one offense ever, they're going to make you pay. And I do think it's maybe somewhat notable, maybe not. You can tell me about the fact that their losses have come to, Alabama, UConn, and Nebraska, three teams that, I mean, I know UConn by the numbers is not great offensively, but I to my eye test, I think they're great offensively. And in games that did turn into a little bit of like trading half court offensive possessions, they lost to some of the best offenses they've faced. And if Purdue covers a couple of plays late, we're having the same conversation. Illinois did a great job of making it a half court game and trading possessions, and may have lost to, another really good offense. So I do think the concerns defensively are still there to an extent, but I am someone who thinks that, as people know who watch the show, I am not a defense wins championships guy in the sport of basketball, in college basketball. I think there was an era for that, and I think that has changed. And I guess we'll see exactly how this season shakes out, but I still think this is a absolute winning formula. But it is kind of interesting that their three losses and their near loss came to some of the most highest performing offenses other than Illinois, and a team that, I still think plays great offense. The numbers don't see it in UConn. So that's what's great about the Big Ten, though, is that there'll be a lot more interesting tests for Illinois and what we're seeing. But super fun group, aesthetically pleasing style. And I think the fact that they do combine, they, score a million points per possession. They've got interesting personalities. There's certainly a couple of pretty notable post-game comments from this one. And I think that it makes them easy to cheer for.
Yeah. And then just to close the book on Purdue before we wrap up, I think at this point, 20 games in, I don't think it's unfair to say that the preseason concerns that, we brought up with Purdue have become real. Like, and that's with Clough being way better than I think anyone expected he would be, or at least we expected him to be, right? They're like the formula for them. And I know I sound very nerdy just being like, oh, the formula for Illinois, the formula for Purdue, but like just the way they have to play to win against elite teams. It's harder for me to envision that working, multiple times in a row in the NCAA tournament than it is for a team like Illinois. That's where I'm at. It doesn't mean they aren't incredibly potent and they're going to win 28 games and they have an elite point guard and an elite coach and bigs. Like any matchup, I am afraid of Purdue. Make no mistake about that. But like when I think about the truly elite teams in the country, the best of the best, I have a hard time viewing Purdue in that category right now. And I think I would have said the same thing before UCLA. And that would have been controversial. That would have been like, oh, this guy's falling. Oh my God, Sweeney, how did you say that? But like that's kind of how I felt. Maybe I'm just scarred from Iowa State and being at that game too. But that's just kind of how I felt about it. And I think these two games have certainly, added fuel to that fire. I'm not saying Purdue can't win a national championship. I certainly think they could. I just think if you're going through the list, like who are the teams you have the most confidence in? Who do you think the teams have the highest ceiling? I don't think Purdue's on that list.
Yeah, I think that I do think if you're a Purdue fan, you could come away from this game. I'm not saying like encouraged, but if a Purdue fan is watching our video and they say, okay, so we switched quite well for 10 minutes, but still got bombed on when we thought we guarded pretty well. Then we guarded, pretty badly for 20 minutes, as shown by the second video they showed. And then, in the final minutes, we botched three coverages pretty poorly, and Illinois hit threes on all of them, and we lost by a couple of possessions to like the greatest offense ever. Like, I'm not saying it would be. I don't think anyone would be doing like the Ryan Russillo meme.
Yeah, like, they made a ton of shots. They were incredible.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's doing the Ryan Russillo meme of like, I actually came away more impressed with Purdue, but I do think Purdue fans could say, okay, these are fixable mistakes to an extent. I think, like we've talked about, they're never going to be the really difficult team to play against. But you watch all those ones where I pointed out that they botched switches, botched their coverage by getting rejected on ball screens. Like, I think some of that could get cleaned up. So I think that would be kind of the encouraging note. And then I do think the last thing, and maybe this is something we should talk more about in the offseason than now, but I'm sure Purdue fans are talking about it. Like, I think Omer Meyer's a great player. But I just, if you were Purdue looking at like, what does this roster need and where should we put our money, particularly in the international market, I just think like a pick and roll guard is like the last thing they needed to add. And I think as he had moments that I thought were still really, really good, I'm not like, wow, Omer Meyer was bad. I actually thought he was really good. And it almost like spoke to me that I was like, wow, Meyer was good in this game, but he still doesn't bring what Purdue needed. And I don't fault Meyer for that. He has quite the established resume of what he is. And I do wonder if Purdue falls short of whatever their goal may be, whether that's championship, Final Four, whatever that is. I wonder if we look at that decision and not say, oh, well, like Meyer's a terrible player, but man, could they have used those resources in just about any other way and probably had a little bit better fit.
Well, that's the challenge of this era for a team like Purdue that wants to be able to build with continuity. Like, the Omer Meyer decision was a multi-year decision. It was like, yes, he'll help this year. And I do think it's hugely valuable that he can, like, you can take Braden off the floor. But you're right. It's like, it was the least significant spot of need on the roster, probably. But it's maybe the most important going forward. And like, if Omer Meyer's your starting point guard next year at Purdue on like a top 4 seed, probably feel pretty good about that. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
you got Braden Smith and you're trying to win a championship.
Well, and look, and again, not everybody has. Yeah, exactly. Correct. Number one, you have Braden Smith win the championship now. Number two, like, I understand, like, you don't have unlimited money. Keeping TKR was expensive. Keeping Braden was expensive. Keeping Fletch was expensive, and he needs to play better. Getting Clough was expensive, but like, I just think in this era, like, not having like a big athletic wing on your roster, like not one of them, is like, it's just sort of jarring to watch. Like, it's like it like you know, Harris and Cox are good players, but like, they're smaller guards. And I think if you're looking at like the one hole, it is that like true sort of 3-and-D player that they really miss. And, you know, obviously Miles Colvin, like, they tried to turn him into that. I don't think he always was. I don't think it's as simple as, oh, you should have kept Miles Colvin, but you know, Miles Colvin would have helped. It'd be nice to have Miles Colvin right now. And I don't know. These are the like decisions at the margins that win and lose championships. And as great, you know, like, you think about like the Lance Jones move and how incredible, like, a marginal decision that was, that like helped Purdue, you know, get to the national championship game a couple years ago. I wonder if the moves at the margins on this year's roster, you know, like Liam Murphy's not a factor. You know, like, were those the moves that win you a championship, or do they leave you again in the very, very good but not elite category? That'll be an interesting story to watch, but certainly a lot more data points for both teams. Let's not overreact to one of the great performances of all time, but it was absolutely incredible to watch. I am so glad I was there. I'm so glad I toughed out the snow on the drive home for it. And yeah, I mean, this was a lot of fun, and I hope we see more like it. But for that to be like the first Saturday post college football, as just like, hey, like, this sport is absolutely ridiculous this year. I'm glad that folks got a taste of it. It was pretty special. So we know the folks watching on Scout Team have been locked in all year. We appreciate anyone else who's joining the party. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe to Basket Under Review, independent college hoops home that is producing content unlike anything else on the internet. Check us out, check out the Discord, and we will see you all next week with more content.